Love is beautiful, but let's be real, it ain't always easy. We've been through the storms, the highs, the lows, and everything in between.
But through it all, we made a choice again and again. We chose love, we chose commitment, we chose us.
Because marriage isn't just about saying I do, it's about choosing to stay.
Welcome to We Chose Us, because love is worth the fight. And we are back. Episode 4. It's me, Rob, and
Chris.
And this is the We Chose Us podcast for marriage and relationships. And we're glad to be here again.
Yes.
Boy, we have been having some conversations.
Good conversation.
Looking at some of these shows and reliving some of these shows. It's a lot. We hope y'all still rocking with us. I think y'all are. And if you are, please share, subscribe, let folks know that we are being open and honest and transparent. We are two pastors who have closed our church in May 2021, and we were on the brink of divorce, and now we're just loving each other, and we're enjoying each other, and we're enjoying life. And if you feel like this can help somebody, then you might want to share this podcast with them, so please do. Today we're going to take a little twist, a little turn, because I think we talked a lot about relationships on the last one. But this one we're going to talk more so about the ministry side. Yeah. And you and I had a conversation a couple nights ago. It was a pretty intense conversation. And I think a lot of old thoughts and feelings about, where we have been in ministry for so long. Mm-hmm. You being in ministry. And I think me being in ministry almost around the same time. I think you started ministry in 2003. Is that kind of like when you got it?
No.
A little bit after that?
More like, 2008.
Okay, so mine was probably around like 2003, 2004. Mm-hmm. So just being in ministry, that type of space for so long. And this one is going to be titled, Was Ministry a Mistake? The reason why it's called this is because we don't have our church anymore.
Yeah.
And so some of the questions that we get are, has your season passed? Mm-hmm. Do you really feel like you were supposed to be pastoring anyway?
Yep.
And we get people feel like they can just off the rails just ask us something. I don't know why they feel like it's something that we just, we tried it, didn't work, and blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know why they don't, there's a huge cost in ministry. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if anybody just really should be jumping in and just be like, it didn't work, let me just try something else. No, we really had considered everything with it. So we're just going to dive deep into that. Do you have anything to share?
Yeah, I think it is a topic that needs to be addressed, mainly because I feel like so many people are in this space, but they're afraid to talk about it. Whether it be they closed their church, whether it be they've had years of ministry and kind of have experienced so much pressure, so much weight, and just kind of feel like I just want to quit, or I don't know if God called me to do this. I'm not sure if I made a mistake and thought God called me into ministry, but he really didn't. Where did I go wrong? Am I doing things right? There's so many uncertainties when it comes to ministry, whether that be pastoring, whether you're an evangelist or in whatever capacity God has called you into ministry. And so I think this is just an important topic, when it comes to the church itself. As you all know, we closed our church literally because we were getting a divorce and we chose marriage over ministry. That was literally the only reason why we closed. But there's so much more that I believe fight against ministry, and those of us who are called, to preach the gospel or to pastor churches, or like I say, ministry is not just a preacher, and ministry is not just having a church. It could be, screenwriting. It can be anything, whatever God, in whatever capacity God has called you to do. I call that ministry in whatever way he's using you within the world. But we question because of so much we kind of fight against. And so Yeah.
And there's people gonna be popping off right now because they're gonna be like, "You should have worked on it and kept the church," and they're gonna be
Not at the cost of losing us.
Yeah, not at the cost of losing us.
I'm
Nah,
not
we're not even. That's not even
Nah.
an entertaining thought. And the funny part is people that say that normally they have not been where you've been or done what you've done or seen what you've seen in order to be able to make a wise decision based off of that.
Yeah.
You should always choose your marriage above anything when it comes down to it, because you guys made a commitment before God, and this commitment, this covenant that you made before God is supposed to be what's standing between you, him, and God. And when you let other things get in the way, even when it comes to ministry, it can be ministry, it can be job, it can even be your kids, it can be other quote unquote idols that you could put before him and put before your spouse, and things can go haywire. I mean, that's just how it is, right? Ministry is no exception. But I do, we had our church for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any point in the 7 years where you felt like it was a mistake? That we ain't supposed to have it. We would never should have opened up these church doors.
The whole 7 years. No, I'm just I mean, I would say, if I looked on the church side, right, I would say no. Our church was flourishing. Mm-hmm. People were being healed. People were coming to Christ who they would say probably if they never encountered our church would have never been introduced into a relationship with Jesus, or really even encountered the presence of God in a way that they did. So I would say from the church side, not necessarily. I wouldn't say that off rip I thought it was a mistake, but I would say all of the extra that we were dealing with in our marriage, I wouldn't say it was a mistake. I would say we should have realigned timing.
Yeah.
We should have worked on us before we started working on everybody else.
Right.
And so that's where I would initially say there was an error there. But I think we were too deep in, to go back and then try to work on ourselves and keep working on other people, which is why the church had to close, because we were too far gone.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to ministry, you see people's lives changing. You see restoration in people's lives. You see these miraculous moments that God is using you to help people encounter with him. And it's hard to say something like that is a mistake. So I wouldn't even say the ministry aspect of it was a mistake. I think how we were operating, how we were going about certain things was more so a mistake. So we can start there, because a lot of times it even goes back to the whole church hurt situation. A lot of people say, man, yeah, I've experienced church hurt. And that's been a battle for some people. No, you didn't experience church hurt, but everybody's story is different. I think you experience something through people, and we are the people, right? So I think ministry itself wasn't a mistake. I think we made a lot of mistakes that caused it to feel like what we were doing for God was a mistake. But ultimately, I don't believe the call or the purpose or the positions that God put us in was a mistake. It was how we approached it. It was the decisions we were making. It was how we were kind of processing our marriage. It was how we were moving forward, how we were, financially handling the church, putting all of our income into the church instead of our own household and feeding our own mouths. I think it was a lot of just mishaps and missteps that caused a lot of frustration and struggles.
Yeah. You make decisions based off of information generally, right? We try not to make emotional decisions. And I feel like there were moments that I could think about where I was like, man, this was a mistake. Is when it would be weird. We would have some great services. Like you said, people were healed. We had healing services. We had people, y'all, listen, we had people that were healed of disease, uncurable diseases.
Tumors.
We had, tumors. The one girl had she had an STD.
Yep.
What else was it?
It was a a swollen. It was like I can't say it was a
jaw,
tumor.
jaw.
Yep, but it was an oversized mass in someone's jaw that shrunk in service. We had a friend of mine brought her dad. Yes,
remember
was
he
blind.
was blind in one eye, and by the time he left service, he could see out of the eye. We had these are things that are going on. Like these are things that we even had couples that couldn't conceive.
Yeah.
And within a few weeks of us praying with them, they would be saying, "Hey, we're pregnant." Like it would just be wild. And those are those things where you're gassed up and you're ready to go, right? And then there's those times where you walk into church and the only people that are at church are the people there to serve. And we had this big building. I talked about it in the last episode. We had this big building. It was like 8,000 square feet. And walking in there, you're like, oh no, this ain't it.
Yeah.
Going through the things that we talked about, the repossessions, this ain't it. You know, going through our marriage thing, like our marriage situation, like, yeah, no, this ain't it. But the thing that we make a lot of mistakes along the way, like you said, like, cause it's hard to sometimes distinguish between what we're doing for God, what God wants us to do, what we feel like we're doing for God, and then what we're doing for ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. So we always you always in ministry, you have to make those distinctions. But in my thoughts, I don't feel like ministry itself was a mistake. My battle comes from how ministry seems to be changing so much, and the timing that we did everything. Like that's my struggle right there. Like that's my biggest thing is the timing that we were doing everything.
Yeah, I mean, I can go back to, like I said, it was not taking the time for ourselves first.
Yeah.
And that can make it look like a mistake. But that also leads me to something I do want to talk about is, what do you believe? Because I think this was also one of our biggest tug of wars. Pastoring the church together was hard.
Yeah.
And so what do you feel like from your end was one of the biggest struggles in pastoring together? Because, sometimes you may think like this is a dream. You get to own a business with your spouse. You get to pastor a church with your spouse. Like, this is amazing. But for us, we were always bumping heads.
Yeah.
There was a lot, I think, from my end that I felt like I had to deal with when it came to pastoring a church with you. And more so pastoring a church with someone, if we can just go back to you struggling at home, there's no intimacy. I mean, there's no communication, there's resentment, there's guilt, there's shame, there's depression, there are all the emotions under one roof. But then you got to go literally pastor, not just run a business, but literally go before people and try to help them and be a vessel of God. This so-called, what they look at you as, perfect person who's presenting the gospel of God, and they're looking at you on the edge of their seats for something that can deliver them, but you dealing with brokenness, you in bondage. As a couple, what was the biggest struggle for you?
I'm logistical and you're not. And because of that, I remember we would be like, it would be like, I don't know, we'll just say it was like Mother's Day or something. And a week or two before Mother's Day, you're talking about doing something for Mother's Day for the moms. And I'm like, it's only a week out. We should have been doing this 8 weeks ago. Like, and I think that was the struggle because I would always want to have everything planned out, everything lined up, everything to a T. And you would, and that's just for that piece of it, right? Yeah. On the flip side of it, you were willing and more willing to lean on the Holy Spirit for direction and guidance. And I was always thinking about how I can do things logistically. So that was a big thing for me because you'll just be, like I told y'all, I don't know. First episode, second episode, just talking about how you were would able to just preach and just go. And I would just be enamored by that, because if I didn't study at least an hour for 4 days out the week, oh, we having a problem. Because I needed that. No, them Saturday night specials, I hated them. Where it would just be Saturday night and I'm sitting here just trying, I still ain't heard nothing from God and I'm still trying to figure out this stuff. And then early in the morning, like I would get so frazzled at the smallest things on Sunday morning, because I would be dang near hallucinating because my message didn't feel right. You know, and the thing is, like, anybody who's a true minister of the gospel, you know how important it is to spend time with God. And you know that it's not necessarily about your delivery or anything like that, but it is about, like, you want to have a conviction about what you're preaching and what you're teaching about. And I remember some messages that I just wouldn't connect with because I would be in so much anxiety because of all the stuff that was going on. And I would hate having to do those things. And then I remember asking you, like, how do you depend on God like that? How do you just depend on God like that? I can't. I have to have these things in front of me in order to do that.
Yeah. It's crazy that you brought that up, because, I mean, this is ministry, marriage, relationship podcast, right? I'm just be transparent. I mean, it's nothing you never heard before, but, you know, I think that was one thing that was a struggle for me, is I felt like I could never fully be myself because it intimidated you. That was a big struggle with pastoring a church together, was I felt like I had to dim my light because I didn't want you to feel more insecure. Because of all the things we were going through at home, I knew insecurity was a big issue. And I felt like I couldn't really be who God had called me to be because I was scared that it would put you further into this place of insecurity and rejection. Because you would always mention, like, more people come to the church when you preaching. And it would be like, I mean, it was never a moment of me like, oh, wow, I never thought about that. It was more like, oh, crap.
But, you know, that was never my thing. It was a joke, because that's what happens, I think, with a lot of women's ministries anyway. Like when women have things, they pack the house out. So it was just more so a joke. But
I think, again, so this is where the role of when your marriage is not working, your mind fills you up with so much stuff, like your spouse is against you and you can't shine because now you got to be careful of especially when you're trying to carry your spouse's weight. You really are walking on eggshells, because at any point, if I make a move, he might break. You get what I'm saying? And so it was like, felt like I was always in bondage trying to go in and preach or pastor, because I would be so scared, like, is today going to be the day that he breaks? You know what I mean? And so I think, like, even I remember this moment. You remember when you had gotten so overwhelmed. This was towards the end, almost towards where we were about to close the church. We didn't know we were going to close the church, but now looking back, this was towards the end of us closing the church. And you had gotten so overwhelmed. You were in this broken place that you were just like, I can't do it. Chris, you take the church. And I became, I guess, we were both pastoring, but you had just made it known, like, Chris pretty much is gonna be pastoring this church.
She's gonna be preaching every week,
right? I'm done.
I'm chilling. I'm good, y'all.
And I remember, though, I don't know if you remember this, but man, I remember leaving that day and I just could not stop crying. But I came in one Sunday, and you were sitting, and you just looked weird, and I was so concerned about you. And I'm like, oh, Lord, what is it now? What is going on? And I came to you and I was like, you okay? And you was like, you started tearing up. And you was like, I feel like I don't belong. Yeah. I feel like I don't have a place. And I'm like, then why you hand me this position? Like, you were once pastor, but it was like, I was getting ready to go up and preach, and this is what I mean by the struggle. Here I am getting ready to go up and preach, but now I got to handle my husband first. Like, what? And that's what I was always afraid of, is I'm carrying so much, but yet I'm trying to hold myself together because I'm like, there's so much going on. And you literally was there in tears. You was like, I just feel like I don't belong. And that's when I felt like it was a struggle, because it was like, is it because I'm now pastoring or I'm now preaching all the time? Like, what? But it was so many other things that it was like, here I am up here about to present this message, and I just have a broken husband right here in the congregation. What on earth is happening? You know?
And it wasn't, and that was the thing. It was, I remember when you asked me that, and I was like, why did I say that? Because it was not based off of what happened with us. I was cool and I was happy, and I wasn't trying to backtrack on anything that had been done. Like, I was like, Chris needs to be the leader of this church because I'm not there. But the problem is, what do I do?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like because we had folks operating audio video. We had folks, ushering. We had folks doing all these different things, music and all those that. The only thing I told you I had an issue with was children's ministry, because I don't have a grace for kids. I love y'all. I love everybody kids that's watching. I love all of the kids that came to children's ministry. I do. But as far as like caring for, like, and Chris knows this about me. I'm going to take a side note. Like, when we in the house, and I like peace and quiet, right? Like, or the kids can be loud continuously. But what I don't is moments of shrieks and moments of, that's why we don't have no dog, because I don't like quick barks or anything like that. Like, I hate those types of things. And so I would sit in children's ministry, and I would be trying to listen to Chris preaching, or I'll be trying to watch on my phone, because the door would be closed, just trying to make sure all was good, or trying to man the social media. And then they'll be like, my son will be crying. Or, you know what I'm saying? Or the kids will get loud or whatever. And it would distract me. And I hated being in that distractful place. And then sometimes I would be the only adult, so I couldn't leave the kids in there by themselves. You know what I'm saying? So that would be another issue as well. But it never was that I didn't believe in you. It never was that I questioned your leadership. And I didn't question your ability. Absolutely not. That's why the whole thing happened. But when I said that I didn't know, I literally felt like I have nothing to do.
Yeah. A place to belong.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't, it was because I was in that routine of, okay, Pastor Rob is here, and, when we would come in, like, you would take the kids somewhere, like the method of how we did things was just totally different now, and then you can't even be, as a pastor, like, you can't even kick it with folks in that way, like, oh, that's just my homie or whatever. Like, we know that, folks in the music ministry, and in audio, video, and all this stuff, we know that everybody like kicks it funny, haha, jokes and all those different things. Well, you got the pastor sitting right next to you, like, how funny, haha, are you really gonna be?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? How many jokes are you gonna say that's on the edge or way past the edge that you gonna say now that your pastor's sitting right next to you? So even when I would get around certain people, it would be a certain way that they would hold themselves. I'm like, that's why you don't belong, because you can't even be yourself and try to be yourself around people, because everybody's like, oh, that's pastor. That's why I hate when people be like, when they curse around me, oh, I'm sorry, pastor. That bothers me. That bothers me so much, because I'm like, why are you trying to be different?
Yeah.
Be yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I feel like it was deeper. Because if I can look back during that time, I feel like there was a lot of struggle. And I'm actually, just because I know it feels like I'm interviewing you about this, but
come on with the questions.
Did you ever, and the reason why I'm asking this is because I feel like that moment was more than just, I couldn't, hang out with the music ministry, or I was in children's ministry. Do you feel like you were enough as a pastor? Do you feel like you was good enough?
No, I don't feel like I was good enough. I don't feel like I was good enough in because of kind of like what I was saying before is I didn't know the leaning on God part. I literally when you're like as analytical as me, like you lean on your mind a lot. You know what I mean? Like it's I get this done, I'll do this, blah 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 blah. And so being able to see how you could handle things and operate and let the Holy Spirit use you. Not to say that you're not analytical, you're not intelligent at all. I'm not saying that. But you have more experience, more awareness, and probably even the way that you even were brought up in ministry has a lot to do with that. But that would leave me in awesome times. And I'd be like, nah, I can't do that. Mm-hmm. I'm not adequate enough for that. And that was a big part of yeah.
So that leads me to the question that I'm trying to get to. So do you feel like as a married couple who pastored together, there was a lot of comparison? Like, because that's how I felt. I guess I'm trying to get to that. Is there was, for me, there weren't just pure moments of linking arms, we doing this thing together. There was more kind of like we were just kind of like, okay, I'm doing this and you doing that. You know what I mean? And it never felt like we were together all throughout the 7 years of pastoring our church. Sometimes, if I can really be honest, it felt like competition. Sometimes it felt like comparison. And I think that's what ultimately got me to that place of tread lightly. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because of, you know what I mean? Like, because, and like I say, and the reason why I'm asking this is because it might not have been, and I don't know, I'm just assuming, it might not have been your intent back then, but going through all of the emotions, the breakage, the bondage, the depression, the anxiety, it comes off that way in our relationship on both sides.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's not just speaking from your side or my side, it's speaking from both our ends. It just, pastoring so often felt like it was a tug of war.
Yeah. Honestly, no. I don't feel competition was it. It was, I legit admired how you were able to navigate. I remember having thoughts and be like, man, number one, every decision that was always made, I always, when we have our meetings and stuff like that, and you'll be with the kids, I would always make it a point, let me talk to Chris, or whatever, like that. If it was a comparison type thing or competition type thing, then a lot more decisions will be made without you. But I remember really trying to make sure that I put you out there, because I did not like, in a lot of the ministries that I've seen, not all of them, but a lot of the ministries that I've seen, the women always played like the background. And I wanted to make sure that, no, like my wife she's involved in this too. So I can honestly, and it might have come off differently, but also did it come off differently, or is that what you had seen so much as the competition in ministries that maybe you were a part of, that you attributed it to that, when that's not necessarily what it was at all. It was just me in a broken place. And because I would look at you for prayer, I would look at you for guidance, I would look at you, and I would never talk down to you, and I definitely would never talk down to you in public, but I wouldn't talk down to you, period. I wouldn't say, well, that's not God. We would never argue about hearing the voice of God or studying. We would none of that stuff would even happen. So no, I don't think it was well, I know it wasn't a competition. It was man, she's doing this thing, and almost like it was an enamorment, like, how can I be that way?
Yeah.
How can I? And if it came off competition, it wasn't competition.
Yeah.
I wanted to operate in that gifting that you had, because you have not only a pastoral gift, you have a preaching gift, and you have a prophetic gift as well. And preaching, that just never was my thing right there. You know what I'm saying? Understanding how to hone and discuss and even work on my prophetic gift, that's the stuff that I leaned on for you to be able to help me with. You know what I'm saying? So no, it wasn't a competition thing.
Yeah. That was it. You waiting on me to dive deeper. I was like, no, I think that was one of our struggles. I mean, not the deepest struggle, but I feel like that was one of the struggles that we dealt with. And, you said something key. It was like, something I've seen. And I think, no, it wasn't anything I've seen. I remember, and this is probably going to play on ministry and our marriage, but I remember, like you said, we started ministry at different times. I started in about 2008, 2009, somewhere around there. And I remember when I first felt like I was called to ministry. Now, I did not grow up with pastor parents, pastor mentors, preachers around me whatsoever. Like, my aunt was a preacher, but we weren't close. Like, it was my aunt on my dad's sister. But, we weren't close. So there was no one I could consult in when it came to preaching or, preaching the gospel or saying that I was called to do anything of that sort. And so I remember when I was called, I went to my pastor. I remember having my first sermon and things like that. And I remember both my parents were like, why? You called to do what?
Yeah.
Them church people crazy. Why would you go do that? They said it was a mistake. So talking about ministry was a mistake. My parents initially was like, you made the biggest mistake of your life. Like, church people, I've seen these people go crazy. These people don't do right. Like, all they remember was just, my little girl's not about to be a preacher. You would have thought I said, I'm going to go sell dope. They were so against it that I remember talking to my mom like, Mom, you think I could be out here doing God knows what, but I said I'm called to preach. And she was like, yeah, there was no support there. And they eventually came around in my first sermon. They were there. But I remember for a long time, it felt like I had no one when I was initially called. And I do remember going to God, because after that, I then had to now seek guidance from the church, seek some type of validation, some type of, I then started kind of replacing my mom's love or wanting it from the church in some kind of way. Maybe a mother in the church or maybe somebody would help me. But I remember my first lady at the time, all she cared about was that I would wear coffee colored stockings. She didn't care about nothing else. Like, she would, and I would go to her intimately about things that I was dealing with. And she would say, hold up. She'll reach in her purse. Literally, it would go like this. I would say, can I talk to you? I really need someone to talk to. And she'd say, first of all, wait one moment. And she'll pull out coffee-colored stockings out of her purse and say, put these on first, go to the bathroom, and then we could talk. And at that moment, I was like,
that's wild.
This is a mistake.
That is wild.
And but I had no one. I had no one. Even when I went, because that church was down at the college that I went to. And so when I came back home and joined the church at home, dealt with the same type of harsh love, not even, I won't even call it love, but harsh treatment, the judgment, the nitpicking, the jealousy. It was so much. And so I would say, and this is just the light of the story, but I would say going through all of those things, I like to even say now, that stuff was just a wash. God, I don't know what was happening back then. I just said yes to you, and I'm not quite sure what all of this was. But I think when we got married and launched our church and started going through what we went through, I was like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I can't do this. Ever since I started, the fruit now, don't get me wrong, the fruit, that's what kept me going.
Yeah, of course.
Because as a result, the lives changed, the people who were being saved. I remember there was a time in my college church where I had, invited some college friends to come to the church to be baptized. I mean, not to be baptized, excuse me, but to come to the church. And that day, they were all baptized. It had to be over 30 to 50 college students. They had ran out of baptism robes. And the kids were just like, we just going to be baptized in what we got on. And we just going to go home wet. And it was that powerful. And so it was fruit like that had me continue moving forward. But the treatment, the lack of mentorship, the lack of love that I received from my parents, the lack of validation. And I know you don't supposed to go to people for validation, but when you're young and you don't know anything about ministry, you're looking for some type of just hold my hand a little bit, and not having that and going into our marriage and you saying you want to start a church. I was like, what is happening right now? And going into launching our church, being married to you and feeling like I had to pick you off the floor, the congregation up off the floor, me off the floor. I was like, I've been bamboozled.
Yeah. And even though you there's a part of the story that you did leave out, because you did talk about going to the first lady, but you also would tell me about times that you would go and minister and the pastor would have something negative to say about either what you said or what you did or something like that. And that played, or would even be jealous of certain things. And so that played a part as well, because even, your leader is basically talking behind your back and, you know what I mean? And dogging you out,
He would never critique what I said, but it was when I started, it was called Prayer Campus Ministries on my college campus. And the ministry started doing exceptionally well. Like, it grew. We would have Bible studies in what then was Kathy Hall. And it was an auditorium on campus. And people started coming. And people started coming to the point where, and this was middle of the week, midweek services, to the point where I then would divert them to the church that I was at on Sundays. And so many college students started coming that the pastor behind my back would have meetings with other people to say things like, this ministry too big for her. She don't know what she's doing. I started the thing. You know what I mean? And I only started it with the heart of God. Truth be told, I might not have known what I was doing if you want to look at it like from a logistical level, if you want to look at it from having, bylaws and all this other stuff. I just wanted a place for people to encounter Jesus. And he would gather and have meetings to find ways to get me out. And I mean, he was inviting young preachers down. I have this young lady, and she's leading this ministry, and I'm trying to find a way, to take over this ministry. And if y'all could come in, and it was stuff like, it was things that were blowing my mind. I just could not understand where this was coming from or why this was happening. And I remember just going to God like, God, I literally don't want shine. I don't want fame. I ain't never asked for nobody's money. I remember going back, and even some of my friends was in some of those meetings. That's how I knew. And some of my friends would come to me and it's like, he's been trying to find ways to take over. But he never came to me and just said, maybe if he would have said, I want to help lead you through this or something, but there was nothing. It was just a matter of how can I move her out the way so that I can get a hold of all of this. And say that this is my church's ministry and we're doing this on the campus and all of these things. And I know I got into a point where I just broke and I left. I left it. I left the ministry. I left that church and I went back home and I was like, I can't deal because I didn't have anyone to go to. Again, I didn't have my parents to go to. If I would have went to them, they would have said, see, I told you so. I told you how those people can be. I told you how church people can treat you. And if I had no pastor, no mentor, no one to go to but God. And I remember God was just like, you've got to trust me. And I didn't know what that looked like at the time. I was so naive, so fresh in ministry that I'm not going to lie to you. I felt like I made a tremendous mistake. I felt like I should have listened to my parents and made a totally different rather than saying yes to God and actually operating as this young girl, as a preacher. And this was 2008, 2009. And there were times that I couldn't even sit in the pulpit because I was a woman, you know what I mean? A young lady, and you too young and all of these other things. And And I remember all of this happening that I mean, I just completely left. And so going from that to kind of a different phase of that, you know, at home, I can say that when we started experiencing all of the things we were experiencing in the church, the repossessions and all of those things, I'm not going to lie to you, did that play a part of my brokenness? Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I knew you were dealing with your own stuff, but what started breaking me more was that I gave God this ultimate yes. And all I've experienced ever since my yes is just brokenness. All I've experienced ever since my yes is like, I felt like I made a mistake. I remember one of my best friends in college. She was my best friend in college, and she called me up one day and she said, do you think you operating out of season, meaning God ain't called you to do this? Do you think that this was a mistake and you're done? And I said to God, I said, for an outsider and someone's my friend to say that, I said, I've made a mistake. And I remember just shutting everything down from there. And I said, I'll never preach again. And I joined World Changers, and I said, I'm going to just sit in this audience, and I'm not going to do another thing. I'm done. I'm done. I wiped my hands clean. And I remember it was a deacon, random deacon, who came to me. He said, you called to preach. And I said, no, I'm not. He said, yes, you are. I said, no, sir, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, I see it all over you. God says, don't you dare give up.
Was it Deacon Donnie?
No.
Okay.
And after that, I didn't do anything. But of course, if we can just fast forward, I ended up meeting you. You wanted to launch a church.
I brought that up because, you know, I always wondered, like, because we've had the competition conversation before, and I always wondered, and do you feel like maybe that's probably what it was, because of there was competition in other experiences, you know? But I can say for me, I never wanted to compete with you. I wanted to do everything with you. I didn't know how.
Yeah.
And I knew that we were radically different in the way that we approach things.
Very much.
But, you know, that wasn't anything that was an issue of mine at all.
I think that's like, when you think about life and marriages, right? I think that's something we all have to understand, is that we bring something totally different to the table.
Yeah.
But oftentimes we dream or wish that our spouse would be like us. You know what I mean? Like, understand us to a point where you almost want them to kind of function or operate like you. That's that whole lack of communication thing, because I feel like if you expect someone to just know where you are, you're expecting them to be so much like you that they can just almost read your mind or read you, you know what I mean? And things like that. But I think for me and for both of us, I think that was the hardest truth we had to face, was understanding that we both are carrying some weight from our past into our marriage.
Yeah.
And we never dealt with that weight. We just immediately launched a church. And so our marriage is now dealing with the pain, the struggle from launching this church, the pain, the struggle from not taking the time to understand each other, and the pain and the struggle from not healing from a lot of things from our past. And so you mix all of that up, you have an explosive volcano.
Yeah.
And that, I believe, was heaviness on us. And so I feel like never being open enough to say, this is what I'm dealing with, this is what I dealt with, this actually played a major role into who I am today as your wife, as a pastor. It just caused a lot of calamity. It just caused a lot of confusion. It caused a lot of, to me, vulnerabilities for the enemy's playground within our marriage. So it was like, you're pulling out all of your insecurities, you're pulling out all of mine. Then we're taking those insecurities, hiding them under the bucket just so we can go pastor and preach the word of God to this congregation, and then come back home, remove the bucket of insecurities, putting them back on, trying to function with what we just took on at church from other members, then putting on our stuff.
Same thing over. Yeah, it's repetitive and it's redundant. So let's change gears real quick. So we haven't officially pastored since May 2021. And there's always a lot of conversation about like, you're not a pastor unless you have a church, right? What are your thoughts when people say that? Like, well, you don't have a church, so you're not a pastor. Like, what are your thoughts when you hear that?
I
Do people even
mean,
come at you like that?
I've had someone come at me like that, and I thought that was the truth too, until my pastor called me pastor.
Rock with them
And I
dollars.
was like, it was like, oh, I'm still a pastor. Wait. But no,
them
honestly, it was
And them Brazeltons.
Yeah, and it was Pastor Cynthia. I talked to her one day, and she said, I remember saying like, well, I'm not a pastor. She said, who said you're not a pastor? I said, well, I don't have the church. She said, who said that you're not a pastor? And she put me right in check. And I was like, well, I thought the church. She said, it's just a building. She said, it's just a building. And I remember, and she said, just because the building's closed doesn't mean your calling is canceled. And I think that was the awakening moment for me, because so many people will try to tell you, you're not a pastor. You don't have a congregation of 1,000 people like I have, or you don't have 8,000 people you got to shepherd over. So you don't dare put your title in with my title, you know. But I think when it comes to your call and who God has purposed you in the world to be, you've got to align yourself with that, regardless of what anybody has to say. And that's something that I had to come to grips with, is if this is who God called me to be, people may say, oh, no, you're not a pastor because you don't have a building. But I am still actively, fully doing what God has told and called me to do. That has not stopped ministry for me. Shoot, none of the stuff that I've encountered in my past has stopped ministry for me. And that's something that I've had to consistently seek God about, is I can't stop doing what you called me to do. And so how does a building change your title if you're actively still operating in the call and in the things that he's equipped you to do? And that's something I had to understand. So now if people say, hey, Chris, do I be like, no, it's Pastor Chris? No, we didn't even do that when we had our church. We never put correction on people because it's just a title.
It's just a title.
But I think it's a matter of the assignment. And that's what my heart beats for, is the assignment. Is now, what are we going to do with the assignment? Now that we are in restoration, what does that assignment look like? Right? What are we doing now? We don't have the building, but what does the assignment look like? And it was funny because I saw a comment after we released the podcast, and it said, so when y'all opening y'all church again since y'all restored? And it was like, wait, hold up, don't rush restoration.
Don't rush restoration.
And that was the thing. And it was like, I know ministry wasn't a mistake, but where we were and how we did things, it was just all over the place. But no, I will not answer that question. I have no answer for that question. But what I will say is that I love that we are fully functioning in our own lane.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different things that I sit back and I'm thankful for, right? Like, we had the opportunity to pastor this amazing church for 7 years, and then we've also had the opportunity to not pastor and get to know each other and all these things. And I'm thankful for, not that I didn't know God for myself before, because I did, but I know him differently now. And things that before would really cause confusion in my life and wondering if I was really called or not. Like, I don't question that call in my life at all. I walk confidently in it, knowing that we don't have a church and not knowing if we're ever going to open up a church again.
Right.
Because the calling comes, it's funny because when I sit down at work, if I'm doing something at work or I'm doing something, I could be out and about or whatever, God always reminds me that I'm Pastor Rob. When I'm at work and I have a colleague that probably doesn't even believe in Jesus, reaches out to me and they're like, there's something different about you. Oh yeah, I know, that's the Jesus in me. That's the pastoral calling in me that you've just never had an interaction with the pastoral calling before. I don't say that, but I know that's what God is showing me continuously. So I don't even think opening the church was a mistake. I think you and I have talked about it. It was a timing thing. But I don't even think that was a mistake. you know, and like I said before, we definitely made mistakes along the way. But as far as the calling is still there, and the calling won't go anywhere. You know, I can't shake it off. You can't shake it off. Well, we know you can't shake it
Oh
off.
no.
Look, we may not have a building, but she's definitely got a congregation, y'all. Like they be rocking with Chris. You know, the phone calls, they keep ringing, and I think I even said this on a previous episode. Like, it's a joy to me to watch you be in this place of ministry. Mm-hmm. It is. When you go and speak, no matter where it is, I'm just happy to be there with you.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's the blessing, because I don't recall that. You saying that, rather, right? There's a difference from you knowing that, but never sharing that with me. You know, but I don't think you had a capacity to share that with me.
But I was always there.
Yeah.
I was at the book table. I was always, we got to make sure somebody watching the kids, because I got to make sure things straight, and I got to, you know, like I got to pray for you, got to carry your stuff. I got to, you know what I mean?
So
like,
funny.
that's it, you know? And maybe I never verbally said it, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to verbally say it. You know, I rock with you, like.
Yeah, which I think spouses need to do more is share.
That's
the
good.
I'm proud of you.
That's good.
You're doing a great job. Because we get so caught up in ministry, we get so caught up in business, we get so caught up in every day that I feel like we never openly just sit and say, you know what, I see you. I see what you're doing.
Girl, you need an
and
offering.
and because we miss that, right? And we also don't know, not saying that we marry our spouse to heal from our past, but we also don't know what that may release us from, you know, because somebody like me who never grew up with somebody saying, I'm proud of you, never having a parent say, I see you, I'm so proud of you, because my parents only could give me what they got. And so getting married and never hearing that too, that then doubles up, you know, the pressure, the questioning, the insecurity, right? And so you may do it, but hearing those words may release, because there's power in our words. And so hearing those words could release so much more in us than we could ever imagine. And so the pressure of the day, the pressure of whatever it is that you're handling, to just say, I see you and I'm proud of you, could release us from so much more than we ever imagined. And this is simple, but it's a simple thing that we just simply don't do.
Yeah.
And I think hearing that now gives me that release, because in our relationship, that was never spoken.
Glad I could do that.
That was never spoken. And so I think a lot of times that was my tug of war in pastoring and being married, because it was like, how does he feel? Where is he? Like, how are things going with us? Like, how does he feel about me? Like, am I doing too much? Should I step back? Like, I just felt like I couldn't fully be myself. But now when I say I feel like I can be myself, I'm not just talking about as a preacher. I'm talking about as Chris, how I style my hair, how I wear my clothes, just so much of who I am. Yeah. I just felt like I couldn't be me, because I was so scared that being me would break you.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that sounds weird, but that's how fragile you were. Yeah. That I was so scared to do any little extra thing, because I didn't want it to be an extra weight or anything to cause you to feel like you weren't enough, or to dim your light by me shining mine. You know what I mean? And I would say, like, as we are growing now and restoring now, one of the greatest joys that I have is that you're okay with me being me.
Absolutely.
And that's something that I don't think I ever was able to do out of the, and I think that's what was suppressing me out of that 8 years. You ever been married to someone where you got to hide you and you can't be yourself? And the weight and the pressure from going home and having to put a cover over yourself because you're so scared that you could break your marriage, or being you could break this other person, because you do care. Even though I might not have been in love, but I was a person that cared enough to say, all right, I got to make sure he's okay. And it just felt like I was suffering.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a voice. And to now just be at this space of 41 where I can say I can loud and proud be me at home and in life.
It brings me to this story that we that a lot of people may not know, or maybe they do, and that's your bodybuilding journey, and how in the very beginning, like y'all just see she competed like in 2022 or 2023, I'm sorry. Yeah. And that was kind of like her year where she did all her competitions and all of that. But we talked about this like month 1 of marriage, and I was like, hex to the no. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's a big no.
You ain't finna be out here with no clothes on, or just a skimpy clothes on, because, and I listen, I had a conversation with a guy, and he was like, they try to sleep with the women. Like, I don't even know where he got it from, because after you did your competition, I was like, what is he talking about? Like, but anyway, like that, when she talks about being herself, that was one of the things about being herself, was that like, this was a desire that she always wanted. So fast forward, she gets out there, she has this amazing show. She sweeps the competition, wins 4 awards, right? She wins 4 categories. She gets her pro card for OCB, her very first competition, and I'm posting the picture or whatever, and my phone, not just once, but several times, it rings from former pastor friends and asking me, how could I let my wife do that?
Yeah.
And you know my response? She look good, don't she? Talk about freedom for her and for me.
Yeah.
Because I ain't got to answer to you.
Yeah.
That is my wife. I'm here to support her in whatever she does. And guess what? She's about to have another show. And you know what I'm saying? And that's literally like you being you. That's what I say. When I see you do things like that, I never will forget. Y'all, when we were at this competition, me and her best friend were there, and so we were looking for music for her to do, like a walk, an entry walk. And the entry walk song was Beyonce and Andre 3000, right? I can't even remember the name of it right now, but I'm sure the folks will know what it is. But when you started walking to that song, you a bad girl and your friend's bad too. You know what I'm saying? When you started walking to that song, she got that swag song. She dripping swag. I'm like, oh no, that's my baby up there on the stage. I was screaming like a madman. Yeah. And I was, tears were flowing down my face.
Because you saw me being me.
And
that broke through for me too.
I was the loudest in that room, losing my voice. I know how much you worked. Yeah. And I know, and this was before we knew you won any categories. Yeah. But you was walking out there, babe, and I was so proud of you. And I was like, this is what it's about. Yeah. Forget anything else. This is what it's about when it comes to relationship, even when it comes to ministry. If I'm here and we're lined up together and you're doing something, I'm in the front row, I'm screaming my head off because I know you, number one, I'm your biggest fan. Number 2, I don't know what's going on in your head. And number 3, I need you to hear something you're familiar with. Yeah. And to hear my voice screaming like a madman, I don't know if you heard it or not, because everything was going like crazy, but I was jumping up and screaming, and Keisha was there, and Laren was there, and they was looking at me laughing because I was just so gassed up. And then you got the awards, and during when they were doing the judging and stuff like that, I was leaning over Keisha. Then I was going to Laren. She about to win this one. Like, she about to sweep. And literally, I called out every single one because your confidence was glowing. Yeah. And I don't never want to take away from that. Yeah. You know, and one thing that you did for me this was recently. This was within the last year. You came home with the card that said, "Thank you, I'm proud of you," and you had a gift certificate to Buffalo Wild Wings in there. Now, y'all, here's the Buffalo Wild Wings thing. Whenever I go out of town, there's two things I look for: a Jamaican restaurant, Buffalo Wild Wings, because those are, I want to find the best Jamaican on the face of the planet. Like, that's just my thing, right? But Buffalo Wild Wings it has to be in the vicinity or something like that. And that just made me feel special. That made me feel seen, because I don't need you to pat me on my back every day. But when you do, and you say, "I see you," that makes me puff my chest up a little bit and be like, you know what, I can take this a little bit longer going on at work or whatever's going on in life, because I know that my wife got my back.
Yeah.
So even though in the last episode I was talking about, you being a ride until whenever, no, you are ride or die, because I know it's been a process, but you have graduated and gotten your degree in ride or die ship here. And there's been plenty other situations that I can go down the list. So if we were ever to do a ministry or a church again, you know what I'm saying, I think it would be pretty successful, because we know each other now.
Yeah.
And we know how each other moves now. And we didn't do that at the house. We would be stumbling over each other, expecting one person to do something and the other person don't do it, and then we'd be doing all that stuff. But now, you see, we kind of got a flow. If one person don't do it, the other one does it, and we don't complain about it, vice versa. It's just a flow that we have now.
Yeah, I agree. And I just, I feel like God moved on us. And but I will say this, as we end, He moved on us, but we had to accept the move.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's key, because there are many times I felt Him moving, but I didn't want to accept the move. And so I was moving in a different direction. I don't care what He was doing. I was like, I can't.
Yeah.
And so I think if you accept the move, then you've got to trust what He's doing and the process that He's putting you in. And so that's if I could just put last words on this particular podcast, if you are questioning what God has called you to do, or the storm, the obstacle, the challenge, whatever it is overwhelming you to a point where you are uncertain as to whether or not God's hand is on you, whether or not God is blessing you, whether or not you're even called and sometimes even qualified for the call, my suggestion to you would be to trust the hand of God more than you trust every outside noise or obstacle that's trying to come against you. And the biggest way to do that, if I can say practically, is to just sit for a moment and don't quit. Don't abruptly give up, but to sit and rest in a moment and just say, God, you've got to show me who I am and what you called me to do outside of all the noise, outside of all the struggle, outside of everything that I've gone through, everything that I'm experiencing. God, I just need to hear directly from you. And many times in those moments, what I've seen is a God wink, but we got to be willing to receive it, because literally you could be so frustrated that even when God is winking at you, giving you that glimpse of confirmation, you're ready to give up. Because you've already said in your heart, I'm not doing this. It's been too much. I'm too tired. I'm done. And so God could be sitting there saying, I'm right here showing you that you're in position. I'm showing you that you're on track. You're on your way. But emotionally, we're so ready to give up that we don't receive that little glimpse of confirmation. And so my suggestion is just to sit for a moment, just to get that glimpse of confirmation, and allow God to move on your heart, to release you to move forward. Because I believe that so many of us are called. So many of us are called. But man, the struggles are real. The uncertainty is real. The insecurity is heavy. The comparison is heavy. There's so much that tries to come against what God is calling us to do. And I promise you, you will realize that what God has called you to do is not a mistake. It's not a mistake. And I believe that. I believe the things that occur around us make us believe it's a mistake, but you cannot believe that God's hand on your life is a mistake. He's the one that's going to carry you through. And I believe that when you get to a point where you trust him above everything else that's trying to come against you, then that's when we'll begin to see clearly where he's leading and calling us.
Amen.
Yeah. And so that's it.
All right.
Because I believe that's what we did.
Yeah, that is it.
And what we're doing.
And what we're
What we're
continuously
doing.
do. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for that. And thank y'all for tuning in to another episode. We will see y'all on the next one. Don't forget to email your questions to show@wechoseus.com, SHOW@wechoseus.com. And we're probably going to look at seeing how we can get some sponsorships or something like that to get things rolling if you guys want to see this continue. All right. Thank y'all.
Love is beautiful, but let's be real. It ain't always easy. We've been through the storms, the highs, the lows, and everything in between.
But through it all, we made a choice again and again. We chose love. We chose commitment. We chose us.
Because marriage isn't just about saying I do. It's about choosing to stay.
Welcome to We Chose Us, because love is worth the fight.